Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Dracut Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry and the co-founders of Marvento Duo, flautist Weronika Balewski and pianist Elizabeth Chladil. Weronika and Elizabeth were artists in residence at the Wallach Farm Music Institute and have collaborated with Multiverse Concert Series to present multidisciplinary concerts in collaboration with research scientists and visual artists. They have performed at the Delcroix Society of American National Conference and have presented community concerts throughout Boston and in Poland. These Boston-based musicians value conversations between performers, audiences, and students. We're so excited to have you here. Can you speak a little bit about your collaborations?
Veronica and I began playing, I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago together, and just found sort of this common musical language. We also happen to be good friends. And so our work together has been all about finding music that we love to share, finding different ways of presenting it to audiences, and ultimately really valuing the conversations, like you said, the conversation between us and the audience when we perform.
And if I could add to that, I think we became better friends through the process of playing together because we saw each other twice a week, and we didn't just talk about rehearsing and just about our music and about our projects, but we also talked about our teaching, and we kind of asked each other for advice with students that we didn't know how to engage, or we tried to figure out how to navigate new partnerships and new relationships, and how to position our work so that we could create more performances and more collaborations, and so I think it was also the conversations that we had between ourselves that I think really shaped us, to consider how our performing was tied to our teaching, and how all of this was part of an ecosystem of people who wanted to connect and were doing so in different ways. Some people connected with music by working on hot cross buns, and some people connect with music by going to a concert and hearing a performance. And that those are both important parts of this ecosystem that we were getting to know, right after we graduated from school.
That's interesting because I don't usually think of music as an ecosystem, but for you to use that term, you're bringing in a whole bunch of different aspects of people then, just by thinking of it in that way. How did you come to use that idea and that terminology?
I think about how I teach one student, and then their family kind of starts coming to the Marvento Duo concerts, and they invite me to something that they're connected with because maybe they're actually part of another musical ensemble, and I think these connections form, and it I don't know, we just start seeing people at events, and we start, like there was a student who Elizabeth was teaching, and then he decided to learn flute with me, and then he was doing both, and now he's like moved on to composition. I don't know, like we just kind of through doing things together made all these relationships with people, and kind of kept meeting at different events and in different ways.
Cool.
That's interesting. Most people think of that as community, right? You're building a musical community and support system, which is nice. It's very nice.
I think I like the word ecosystem that you used, and I think thinking kind of scientifically, it really, when I think of an ecosystem, different parts of it are reliant on each other, and that's how it should be in a community. But somehow, thinking about biology and the way that this relies on this, and if you take something out, then the whole system starts to degrade a little bit. Yeah, it's a really precise word to use, I think.
Yeah, it puts you in a different mindset. So you said that you've collaborated with research scientists too. What types of things have you done with them? And how did that come about?
Um, so maybe I'll give an overview of multiverse, and then Elizabeth, you can kind of describe a specific project. Does that work?
Sure.
So, Multiverse Concert Series is a project created by a friend of ours, David Ibbett, and he's a composer and a musician, and he cares a lot about invoking a sense of wonder about our universe, and he um, asks scientists to talk about their work in 5 or 10 minute lectures that are at a level that the general public can understand. And then he pairs music to go with those lectures. Often he composes music that's based somehow on the scientific data of these scientists. He
Wow.
asks poets to write something in response. He gets like amazing video design to happen by visual artists, and then Marvento Duo has come into these concerts also to perform music by living composers, music also by some composers who are from previous eras, but that somehow we still manage to fit into the theme of the evening. And our hope one day is also to play a piece by David that he composes for the flute and piano duo. So that might be a future project one day down the road. Elizabeth, we've done a few things with multiverse, but I don't know if there's like one that sticks in your mind as like particularly emblematic.
I think it's the the experience of crafting a program of music around a scientific theme is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. And we've done two of them around coral reefs, and then and and so like those two particular concerts, it was the same scientist who presented, new findings 2 years later, and so um, it was a. It's just interesting to think about the message that the scientist might be presenting. In her case, it did have there was a call to action
Uh-huh.
to take care of the environment, and here's what you can do to help slow global warming, which is causing all of these problems with the coral reefs. Um, and so there's sort of that aspect to it, but also it's really interesting and engaging to look for music that evokes a particular emotion. And the music that we chose um, had sometimes loose ties to the ocean. It wasn't that we didn't look for sort of WC, the duo equivalent of La Mer by WC or something. But thinking about more abstractly about the expansiveness of the ocean, how it feels to think about
Mm-hmm.
large parts of our universe like that in our world, um, and to try to craft a program in which the the emotional arc of what the scientist might be talking about is supported by our music. If it's really dramatic, or we played some very contemporary pieces, kind of really crunchy, atonal sort of things versus things that are more fluid and open sounding. And so it's just to me, that's a really interesting part of those projects of the Multiverse Concert Series, that it's it's not just about finding music that's beautiful or that finds or meaningful to us, but it also serves this purpose and is meant to in any sort of arts integration, the idea that the music and whatever the other subject is, whether it's art or science, both of those things serve each other to make a larger whole and to make a bigger impact on the audience.
I
It
keep
sounds so.
noticing how both of you are artistically oriented, but also scientifically oriented. So, did you choose that deliberately? Is that an accurate way to portray you a little bit?
Well, in my family, half the people are scientists, so maybe that's where I get that from.
Okay.
And I was pretty involved in science things through high school, so yeah, I think that comes naturally. What about you, Elizabeth?
Um, I don't know. I like learning about a lot of different things. I mean, there was a brief few months when I was an undergrad that I thought I'd double major with English, and then there was just too much piano in my life to do that. I think, I think both of us have never been like just music is the only thing that's important to us.
Yeah.
Sort of this. Weronika definitely has this curiosity about the way other things work, and I do too. And I wouldn't really consider myself a scientist, but I probably have kind of the engineering mind. Two of my family members are engineers, and that's that's just what I grew up around, and I like that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And I also have to say that David who's the founder of Multiverse. He has this ability to find people who are passionate about what they do and get them to share that. And so all the scientists and visual artists and poets that we've had a chance to work with, he creates spaces for them where they just kind of light up and geek out and just share what they think is like the coolest and most amazing thing to an audience who's ready for that and ready to go with them. And so we just kind of like learned a lot about coral reefs because of this woman, Sarah Davies, who was so passionate about it. And, she pulled up like a little video of how coral reefs are born, and there are these little creatures swimming, and she's like, look at these cute babies, like, aren't they adorable? And we're all like, but like there's just something so infectious about how she shared that I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's wonderful. It just sounds incredibly wonderful. So I also wanted to ask you about Delcroix. You played at the conference, but I really don't know what that is. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So Emile Jacques Delcroix was a Swiss musician and educator living about 100 years ago. And he pioneered a method by which students in the conservatory where he was teaching could learn to be more musical and more expressive and more rhythmically accurate through using movement. And so, in the days when it was kind of shocking to show your ankles, he said, oh, we're going to be barefoot in my class, and you're going to move, and you're going to clap, and you're going to dance, and you're going to make all these beautiful shapes with your body, and it's in the service of becoming better musicians. So he developed a lot of exercises, he developed this whole approach, and then he taught it to his students, and those students spread it kind of throughout the world. And so there's still this kind of student apprentice model where you just kind of go and absorb this method and learn about it. And it's a very deep way of learning music. So I think we both have found that it is, I think we kind of like have been drawn to it for two reasons. One is pedagogically. It's a really effective way for our students to learn the things they need to learn in ways that are more effective because it involves the body. It's not just intellectual. So to give a quick example, if a student needs to play the rhythm da, dum, bum, and that long note needs to be 2 counts and they're not getting it. It's too short. They're going da, 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 right? It's not long enough. You can say, oh, count to 2. Ta, like, okay, did you count 1, 2? And it's a very intellectual solution. Whereas if you move your body and you show that length and you have a transfer of weight, you've engaged your senses, you've engaged your sense of balance, you've engaged your sense of expression, and then it's impossible for you to play that note otherwise. So pedagogically, I think it's just a very effective way of learning music. But also, as performers, we were drawn to the way that Delcroix gets to the heart of connection and moving someone. Like when you talk about going to a performance that was moving, we think that that's an emotional state. But actually, I've been thinking more and more that it's actually that it physically moves you. The music is so engaging that physically you feel like, oh, you can get up and dance to this, or you can get up and sway. And we've, by diving into these little details of Delcroix's exercises, we've realized, oh, when we perform this passage and we have more of this sense of swinging that we just did in our Delcroix exercise, that's literally what creates a sound that incites swinging in a listener. And it has helped us to be much more precise about how we prepare a performance and polish it with all these details that truly like make the music something that brings people alive and sets them moving. Okay, Elizabeth, your take on Dalcroze. That was my
to say.
Well, okay, my question for you is like, how would you explain what happens in a Dalcroze class?
Oh boy. Okay. In a lot of really traditional Dalcroze classes, a teacher will set up a lot of activities, listening activities in which maybe the teacher improvises some music on their instrument, piano or flute, and the students have to listen for something in particular and then respond in a certain way. And so it's very active listening, and the way that you know that a student is listening is by what their body does, or what the sound, like if they sing something, if that's what the instruction is. And so it's the teacher is constantly changing what the music is within a very strict framework, so that students are kind of guided along to something that's a little more challenging but still supported in their learning. And I think that's the most basic explanation of what happens. There's so many different subjects or topics that you could be working on in a class, but one class might be devoted mostly to learning 6/8, or how does
Sure.
the subdivision of the compound time, three subdivisions in one, and there's 2 large beats in the measure, for 40 minutes. How many different, we're often asking the question, how many different ways can we practice this feeling? How many different ways can we hear it in music? How many different ways can we experience it with our friends in class, on our own? And when we flipped that, Weronika and I kind of started flipping that into our rehearsals. How many different ways can we practice this passage that is rhythmically really challenging and technically challenging, and in such a ways that we would be able to play it fluidly and confidently, and maybe we missed one note, but the line is still there, and it still conveys movement and conveys emotion. And we, just to speak a little bit about the performance presentation we did, we used 2 movements of a piece by Carl Vine, and basically showed examples of how we used Dalcroze techniques to practice these more challenging passages. And it's definitely effective as a solo musician, but I think it's particularly effective as an ensemble, because I've been in rehearsals where you want to talk a lot about how this phrase should be, or let's practice 10 times so that we all come in at the same time, or get this retardando exactly the same. And I had this experience. I was working with a pianist on a duo piece. She did not have any Dalcroze training, but I said, what, let's just stand up, we're going to walk this together. And this tempo change thing was solved within 20 seconds just by us standing up and changing that tempo physically. And then I said, now we're going to sit down and play it. And it was spot on. And it's going to stay that way. Where, each day we practice, we can come together and do the same stepping exercise, and it's going to stick, because it's not just here, but it's in
your body. Yeah. It reminds me actually of some of the things physical therapists are doing with people who have trouble walking. I work a lot with the elderly, so I'm thinking particularly of people who've had strokes, but it's also any type of injury to get back up and to move. They've actually started to use music that's walking music. Now I say walking music, and everybody knows what I mean when I say that, right? But it's a particular type of beat and rhythm, and you take it in, and then you can just put it out in your limbs and have your body move. It's very interesting, and it's so worthwhile. It's such a fundamental thing that we forget, unless we're marching, right? We have marching bands, but where did they come from? They came from marching to war and marching to get someplace, or to go from town A to town B to deliver the pumpkins or whatever. You know, we forget that music had a purpose that wasn't just to express ourselves. It was to help us get somewhere physically as well as emotionally. It's very exciting.
And one very cool tidbit just came across in a book
Oh,
is that there is a study that showed that moving together in time
Mhm.
increases cooperation in a group.
oh,
Right.
And they studied this with like some toddlers, and they had some toddlers like with an adult like tap the beat together. And then they measured like how likely the toddler was to share a piece of candy with someone or
oh,
something like that.
uh,
And then for the other group, they deliberately tapped off the beat.
ooh,
And so, you know, I don't know. These studies are always kind of peculiar in how narrow they have to be.
yeah,
Sure, of
But
course.
I think there is this greater point about how does moving together increase our bonding and our cooperation and our willingness to help each other. So,
Well, people have been talking about that with singing too, which we're not supposed to do in groups right now, but how if you breathe in and breathe out together and hold that,
mm,
how it builds an ecosystem.
yeah.
I'm trying to say that and think of that terms as opposed to community. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So you both have a lot of interest in science and that aspect, both of music and of life. How did you decide to become musicians?
mm,
Um, well, I started taking lessons when I was 6 because my older siblings took lessons and
mm,
we were just doing that in my family. Um, Actually, my grandparents on my father's side met. They lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they met because they were both teachers at an accordion school.
Oh my
oh,
gosh.
uh,
These existed in that
Yes.
time, and I
We
just
got to bring them back.
yeah.
oh
I'll be the first student. I
yeah.
want to play accordion.
Mm,
I mean, I actually didn't find out about this until I was in college already, but I I was taking lessons, and I just have this, you know, at certain points in life, sometimes you get moments of clarity about life,
Mhm.
and I was actually I was part of a community children's choir at the time when I was in middle school and high school, and I just remember this one moment when we were in a performance at a festival, and we were singing with the orchestra, and it was this beautiful piece of music, and I just had this feeling like, wow, I want to be a musician
mm,
when I
huh,
get up there. And
How old were you?
8th grade.
mm, wow,
So right around the time when you kind of need to start making some decisions about how you're going to
Right.
spend your time in high school.
yeah,
And yeah, so that, you know, that wasn't, it's not like you flip a switch and then life is easy after that, or the
mm,
decisions are easy or like the path is clear. But
Sure.
Were
uh,
you sure about it after that time? After
yeah,
that eighth grade moment?
yeah.
mm,
I don't know. It just was a very deeply felt experience that
mm,
this is what I want to do, and you know, sort of, you know, is it a music education degree? Is it a performance degree? And then after that, how long do I want to stay in school?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what kind of work do I want? What feels good and is also financially viable, and all of those questions that we all have to ask ourselves.
Sure.
But
Well, thank you,
that,
Diane and Tom, for the question, because now I know something new about my friend.
ah, wow.
I thought I
I don't
told
know
you
how
that
we've
before.
never talked about that
I'll tell you about the
that
song sometime.
moment.
The song, well, song piece, yeah.
How
Wait,
about
what was the
your,
music? Do you remember the music?
Yeah. So there's a actually it's the tune Gustav Holst, The Planets for Jupiter's theme,
oh,
and it was uh, we were singing at this festival. It was all a lot of English choral music, and there's a piece the English in the UK. There's a very popular tune, "I Vow to Thee, My Country." It's a very patriotic British hymn.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this particular piece, it was a contemporary piece. It was using that part. That was like the A section of the piece, and then the B section, the composer. It was very atonal. The composer was writing about his father, I think, or grandfather had been on the Bataan Death March,
ooh,
and it was sort of it was this. The words in the middle had something to do with the road has bends and turns, and my spirit is suffers, and I don't know. It's a very, very powerful piece of music. It's definitely the hymn tune comes up quite a bit in church still, and I always remember what that moment and kind of get a little tear in my eye sometimes. But
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. How about you, Veronica?
I had that moment much later. I was in my senior year of high school, and as I mentioned, I had been pretty involved with both Science Olympiad and with music, and I always felt this pull between the two. And I got a summer job as like the lowliest lab assistant in my neighbor's biology lab, and I was just kind of, I had to take cells out of deep freeze and put them somewhere, and I don't know, it was very menial work. And I just noticed that all these scientists all day in the lab were doing that with like headphones in their ears, listening to something while they did this, and then they had their conversations and they had their big lab notebooks. And the vibe in the lab was like this like focus and stillness, but like kind of you're on your own doing this work. Even though now that I know more about the science world and like I know there's a lot of collaboration. But then I think later that night I went to the jazz band concert at my high school, and I think I was playing in one piece because my band director had kind of pulled me in. Flute isn't usually part of jazz band. And I was just waiting in the wings, and I saw this like group of musicians playing, and then the audience was dark, but I could kind of like feel the music coming from off stage like into the audience, and all these like bright lights and all this energy like being sent to the audience. And like the feeling of that was just so exciting and so collaborative. And I was like, oh, like that's what I want to do. I don't want to be like on my headphones on my own at a lab bench. Like I want to be with people and like sending things out to other people, like in that very direct way. And so, yeah, that was my moment of decision.
This is so cool. I am so looking forward to sharing your concert, because what you just said is what you both just do. You do it. You send the music out to people, and it's such an incredible gift. Thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you both.
Really. And everyone else, you should come and see our phenomenal players on, let's see, when is it? It's the Dracut Arts January event at 4 p.m. on Saturday, January 22nd. Always tickets are available through Eventbrite, and they are free. So just sign up or get in touch with us at dracutarts@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you both.
Wait.
Take care. Thank you.